massive, monstrous, and highly destructive. No, I'm not talking about your mom.
My mother? Yeah. Let me tell you about my mother.
And definitely not you on the other side of the screen. I'm talking about beings that exist within Runeterra that basically let League have its own monsterverse. So let's get into it, because it's time to check out the big ones. The Aberration. This right here is an aberration, just like the name says, except in this case, it comes from the spirit realm of Ionia. And man, this aberration is pretty interesting, because unlike a lot of spirits, it feeds on material energy, which lets it grow bigger, and I'd assume stronger too, reaching absolutely massive proportions. And here's the thing, there's no known limit to how much it can consume and grow. Just take a look at the final concept art for this aberration's design. Tell me that doesn't have full-on cosmic horror vibe. That looks straight out of the void. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just look at the aberration's colors in the level up animation of Kinnen's card, or take a look at the cards from the Kinku Order squad of Yordles led by Kinnen. A lot of people thought it was actually a gigantic Voidborn invading Ionia, maybe through some kind of rift that opened nearby, or even directly in the first lands, but that's not the case. Riot just used colors and an aesthetic that looks exactly like the Void, and later confirmed they're completely different things. Honestly, the design is kinda cool, but it is what it is. It's basically a void monster. I didn't really get anything that made it feel like a super abnormal or corrupted spirit from Ionia or anything like that. And to be honest, the other aberration concepts were way better, and I'd even say more powerful, like this first one here. Man, I actually had to laugh a bit. Look at this dude. The spirit was basically going to be like a bodybuilder, and it didn't even have a head. Seriously, there's no way you can look at this and not think of Darkshine from One Punch Man. And also Marugori, who was a guy that turned into a massive monster, 100 times bigger than any real bodybuilder in the real world, or even in the fictional world where the story takes place. One detail is that the artist himself mentions on ArtStation that to create the first concept, he tried to imitate and recreate the vibe of manga. And honestly, I say it was straight up inspired by One Punch Man. And I also think he pulled a lot from Attack on Titan as a reference, because that aberration concept plus the pose, the environment, and even a bit of the context looks a lot like the Colossal Titan. And right away, all I could think about was the march of the horde of Colossal Titans during the rumbling, with the army trying to stop them. And man, that headless Colossal Titan style aberration is actually insane. It's a shame it wasn't chosen. I keep thinking about the size of this aberration because according to the image that compares several giant monsters and characters from anime, manga, and movies, Marugori is around 270 meters tall, while the Colossal Titan is about 60 meters. The second version of the aberration already looked closer in size and body type to the final concept, but it had a head that didn't lean into cosmic horror, and instead looked more like some kind of animal or something like that. You can also notice it has this liquid-like effect across many parts of its body, and the Yordles are down there looking at it in horror. According to the artist's own description of this concept, the aberration would be a sick entity, wandering aimlessly through the spirit realm. But it gets even worse, because this diseased entity would be vomiting poison throughout the spirit realm, and that poison is probably like toxic residue from that material energy the aberration consumed. And man, that would most likely leave a trail of contamination that would mess with the entire balance, because it would definitely infect other spirits, making them sick or corrupting them as well. It would basically be like an environmental disaster, Chernobyl style, but in the spiritual plane. The artist even finishes by saying that Kinnen and his squad are down there watching all of this in horror, because the whole thing is a complete disaster. The third version looks very similar to the second, and I think it would keep that poison aspect. The difference is that the head would be severed, and there would be fewer liquid details across the body, with the poison coming out of the neck along with a scream similar to the Banshee spirit. This form even looks a lot like Shishigami, the forest spirit from Princess Mononoke, but in its corrupted form after having its head ripped off. So overall, the aberration is actually more interesting because of all its discarded forms than the final results itself. But even so, it still earned a spot on this list. Before we keep going, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member. You'll get access to some really cool perks like picking video topics or getting early access to videos. Aya Skyla, figurehead of the deep. Ayaskyla is an ancient colossal sea monster that seems to have parts from different types of marine creatures, including mollusks, crustaceans, and even a lanternfish, along with a monstrous female human-like head. Beyond her titanic size, Ayaskyla appears to have some control over the tides, surrounding herself with a kind of vortex, as if she's creating armor or something like that. And you can see her holding something that looks like lightning, which suggests she could use it as a weapon. In that case, it even looks like a sword. In her other concept, we can see that the vortex she uses to surround herself also pulls ships towards her, and even helps her suspend herself as she emerges from the water. Ayaskyla made her debut in the Legends of Runeterra, and the description of her card is given by Neela, who says, "Come Ayaskyla, you are old indeed, if Ashlash knows your name, but old or young, pretty or ugly, no matter. There is no higher honor for any monster than to fall to my blade upon the open sea." And yeah, Neela and her crew actually go up against Ayaskyla.
Alright, thought you'd be bigger. The water is not yours, monster, but mine!
This already starts to show in the splash art of Ayaskyla's card, because that ship you see there is the Tide Dancer, the fastest ship Bilgewater has ever seen, with Neela as its captain.
Swift, strong, she cuts the tides like a dancer. Carry me to distant lands and worthy challenges.
And we can see part of this epic fight in the level up animation of Neela's card, and also in the splash art of the card itself. Ayaskyla also appears in the level up animation for Janna's card, and also in the character's interaction voice lines.
You wish ill upon the weak. Now you face me. I see you swim, but can you fly?
In the lore, Janna notices that the battle was happening and uses her divine power as the wind goddess to dissipate Ayaskyla, while also pushing Neela's ship away from the coastal waters of Piltover. On top of that, Ayaskyla appears in the background of cards from two other members of Neela's crew, which are Dedicator of the Challenge and Wizened Helmsman. And while the name Ayaskyla is basically a reference and homage to the Greek monster Skyla. And man, it would be insanely cool if we had a Bilgewater themed season placing Ayaskyla where Otacon used to be in the river, and when players managed to take down a good portion of her health, she would completely surround herself with water vortex, protecting herself just like in her concept. There's a lot of awesome stuff Riot could bring from the lore into the game. Vialmaw. Even though it was a map that could be just as slow-paced as Summoner's Rift, Twisted Treeline had good intentions when it launched. Its biggest highlight and main objective, besides capturing altars, was Vialmaw. And no, Vialmaw is not a being that originated from the Shadow Isles. Back when the 3v3 map was reworked, there was a discussion on Reddit asking more about the monster's origin, and the Rioter Dinopause said at that time that Vialmaw was something completely different from Shadow Isles. It was a power that found a way to enter the world through the Shadow Isles. Of course, that was said many years ago, but since we never got a full overhaul and even the updates to Elisa's lore still kept the same idea, we can safely treat it as canon. If you check the wiki, what we find out about Vialmaw is a description saying that this supernatural horror is a monstrous creature lurking in the darkest pits beneath the Shadow Isles, and its true origin is completely unknown, except for the assumption that this ravenous spider god is a life form from another world. But by interpreting both the older information and the newer bits, we can kind of piece together where Vialmaw might come from. As we know, it's a god, and I'd probably say something like Naga Akaboros, Janna, or Volibear. All three of them are spirit gods. So yeah, it's possible that Vialmaw comes from some part of this spirit realm, but for some reason, it couldn't cross into the physical world. Maybe it's trapped or sealed, but either way, that changed when the Ruination happened. I think that event may have created some kind of breach between the planes, allowing Vialmaw to enter. From there, it built its nest and feed on the most daring and reckless ones who tried to reclaim the arcane high magic artifacts that still remain in the Vault of Heaven, located in Helia, the former capital of the Blessed Isles. When Elise went to the Shadow Isles with a group in order to please LeBlanc by retrieving the skull of Sanuzal, she and the other members of the Black Rose ended up finding the nest built within the dark ruins of the devastated city. And that's where they came face to face with an ancient being, something long forgotten by time itself. Vialmaw then emerged from the darkness and started attacking everyone. It bit Elise with its fangs, and immediately she began to suffer the side effects of the venom, collapsing to the ground and writhing in agonizing pain, screaming as the poison spread further and further through her body, forcing her into a horrific transformation that gave her arachnid features, her spine twisting in a rippling motion as spider-like legs burst out from her newly formed body. Man, Vialmaw, to this day, is the only monster and one of the very few beings in Runeterra known to cause a process of mutation and transformation like this. It turned Elise into a spider, while still allowing her to switch back to her human form. And on top of that, this mutagenic venom basically sustains Elise's beauty and youth, while also keeping natural death away, like aging itself. It also creates a bond between a god and servant, to the point where Elise could understand it, knowing what the spider god desired, what her new mission would be, and what she would receive as a reward. And one of the many abilities Elise gained thanks to Viomol, like I mentioned before, was the ability to speak the language of spiders. It's kind of like Harry Potter, who could speak the language of snakes because of Parseltongue, due to the fragment of Voldemort's soul inside him. In Elise's case, it would be something like spider tongue, or arachnid tongue, I guess. But yeah, you get the idea. Beautiful words. Now, another ability that really shows how powerful Viomol is the fact that Elise can casually move through the Shadow Isles without being affected by the magic of the Black Mist, or disturbed by the specters that dwell there. It's like she has some kind of immunity or camouflage. Because of that, she can keep searching for the vault and bring back whatever artifacts and items she finds. No wonder she's extremely useful to LeBlanc. And yeah, I know it's possible to go to the Shadow Isles without having the protection of a god, some legendary item, arcane weapons, or petricite along with strong magic. But you'll get there, start walking around and exploring, and over time, the Black Mist will begin to affect you. You basically become a beacon for specters that will drain your vitality, along with other effects like paranoia and fatigue, until eventually your body becomes nothing more than an empty shell that some spirit might even take over, or your soul ends up trapped there too, getting consumed by some stronger specter. If Elise hadn't found Viomol's nest along with the other members of the Black Rose, that would have been their fate. In Legends of Runeterra, Viomol got its own card, and it's pretty interesting. In it, we see Viomol emerging from the ground and attacking a caravan. That part is a bit confusing because that location isn't the Shadow Isles, and I highly doubt it was the Blessed Isles in the past, so it might be that Viomol has its nest in the Shadow Isles but can now travel to other regions. Although at the end of Elise's lore, it says that from time to time it summons her so the sacrifice can be carried out. Because of that, I used to think that it worked almost like Pennywise from It. After feeding for a certain amount of time, it would enter a kind of hibernation, staying like that until the next cycle begins and it wakes up again. But apparently that might not be the case. Now here we have Viomol's concepts, and all of them would have been pretty cool, some of them even more than others, but the only one I think is really nonsense is Concept E, where instead of a spider, Viomol looked more like some kind of worm, almost like Baron Nashor. In the end, Concept A was chosen and moved on to the next phase, and here we have the final polished concepts, showing more of Viomol's size and details, along with some notes from the artist explaining its arachnid body. And yeah, I know a lot of people miss our boy Viomol and Twisted Treeline, with the only nostalgic reward being a Halloween icon of the big spider, and the farewell emote that was given to players when the map got removed. But faith is a rewarding thing, because in the dev update released on March 2nd, they were asked about bringing back Twisted Treeline, and the writer Pablo Beleza said that for now, they're not considering bringing 3v3 back, since League is going through an engine rebuild. In fact, in another dev update, people were hyped when it was announced that we'll finally get a fully integrated client next year, something many are calling League 2, even though the Rioters refer it to as the League Next project. On top of that, it's possible Riot doesn't even have the original 3v3 map files anymore, and building a map from scratch right now when the game is about to get a whole new structure without all that spaghetti code would just be a waste of time and money. It makes more sense to leave that for the future. But going back to Pablo, he said he also misses 3v3, and that maybe it could return someday. If that happens, we might get a brand new 3v3 map, and who knows, maybe even a new look for Viomol. We love its design, but if Baron Nashor got so many visual updates that made it look more and more insane, why not Viomol? Now, all we can do is wait and keep believing that one day we'll be able to dance in front of him again in his nest, watching the coolest and cutest giant spider of all time doing the iconic Carlton dance. But yeah, that's basically it. I'll see you guys in the next video.